We're all taught that intelligence looks a certain way, right? It's polished, it's organized, it's always having the perfect answer. But what if that's all wrong? What if I told you that some of our so-called bad habits, yeah, the very things we get criticized for, might actually be the signature of a seriously high-performance mind?
So, let me just ask you this straight up. When you hear the word genius, what do you actually picture? No, really, forget the stereotypes for a second and just think about it.
Okay, so on one side, you've got that classic image of success, the straight A student, the super polished professional. But the reality of genius? Well, that's often a whole lot messier. It's unconventional, maybe even a little abrasive. And that is the core conflict we're going to dive into today. All right, let's kick things off with the internal world. Yeah, the glitches that are happening inside your own head. This is all about how a high-performance brain just processes information in a totally different way. First up, a total classic, overthinking and anxiety. You know the one. We're always told this is some kind of malfunction, a bug in the system. But what if it's actually a feature? The idea here is to reframe it, not as just worrying, but as something way more powerful, high-speed simulation. So what does that actually mean? Well, your brain isn't just stuck in some endless worry loop. It's literally running thousands of complex scenarios per minute. While someone else is looking at a problem and seeing a simple path from A to B, your mind has already built this incredibly detailed 3D map of every potential failure, every consequence, every hidden variable. See? It's not a flaw. It's a super-powered form of threat assessment. Okay, let's talk about the next internal glitch, and oh boy, I think a lot of us are going to feel this one. It's that nagging, persistent feeling of insecurity, right? That self-doubt, that imposter syndrome. But the reality isn't that you're inadequate. Nope. It's that you're what we can call an intellectual imposter. Think of it like the Dunning-Kruger effect, but flipped completely on its head. Instead of being overconfident about what you know, true intelligence makes you acutely aware of the sheer vastness of what you don't know. So that feeling of being an imposter, it's not a sign of weakness at all. It's actually a hallmark of high awareness. Your mind is just humbled by how complex the world really is. Okay, so we've seen how these glitches can change the way we think. But what about how we interact with other people? How does it affect that? Well, that brings us right into our second section, glitches in social dynamics. Ever been called antisocial or aloof just because you need some time to yourself? Yeah, the surface level judgment is that you're just avoiding people, but the reality is actually a very deliberate and very necessary strategy: strategic social ghosting. And why is this strategy so vital? Look, deep, complex thought, the kind that leads to actual breakthroughs, it just can't happen with constant interruptions. You're not really avoiding people. You're fiercely protecting your bandwidth, the cognitive resources you need to do your best work. For a mind like this, solitude isn't empty space. It's the lab. It's where the magic happens. All right, next up, that cringy feeling of social awkwardness, of just not quite matching the vibe in the room. And again, the easy explanation is, oh, they just lack social skills. But the reality is often the complete opposite. It's what we're calling the hyper-aware social gap. So what's really going on in those awkward moments? It's a massive, massive data overload. Think about it. While most people in a conversation are just hearing the words, your brain is processing everything else. The microexpressions, the tiny shifts in tone, all the subtext, the potential motives. This isn't a social deficit, it's a social surplus. And yeah, it's exhausting. It's because your brain is doing like 10 times the work of everyone else in the room. Okay, for our final section, let's look at the glitches that cause external friction. This is basically what happens when a super fast-moving mind slams into a slower-moving world. And this one's a biggie, being labeled as rebellious or difficult, especially in places like school or work. On the surface, it just looks like you have a problem with authority, right? But the reality is you're a systems challenger. And this really gets to the core motivation. It's not about rebellion just for the sake of it. It's about a deep, almost physical intolerance for inefficiency and rules that make no sense. A system challenger doesn't respect authority just because it's authority. They respect reasoning. So if a rule or a process is broken or just plain dumb, their brain doesn't just question it, it instinctively wants to fix it or just throw it out entirely. All right, let's get to our final glitch. This is one that gets misinterpreted all the time as impatience or even arrogance, but the reality is something way more fundamental. It's a cognitive speed mismatch. I want you to picture any group discussion like it's a race. Your brain, it's already sprinted to the finish line, analyzed all the results, and is stretching for the next race, while the rest of the conversation is still lacing up its shoes at the starting blocks. That feeling of frustration you get, it's not arrogance. It's the genuine day-in, day-out struggle of trying to sync a high-speed processor with a world that often feels like it's stuck on a dial-up connection. You know, this quote just nails the whole idea perfectly. Genius isn't always clean and polished. Sometimes it's really messy. Sometimes it's just a person staring at a wall, totally frustrated by a simple task because their brain has already mapped out 12 different ways it could fail. It's all just a byproduct of a much deeper level of processing. So, after all this, after seeing how these so-called glitches are actually features, what's the big takeaway? Well, it's not just about understanding these things in yourself or in other people. It's about completely reframing them. It's time to reclaim your genius glitch. Here's the core message, plain and simple. These traits are not flaws that you need to fix. They're features. They're the signature of a mind that's just operating on a different, higher frequency. The real challenge, but also the biggest opportunity, is to just stop apologizing for them. It's time to own them as the strengths they really are. And so, I'm going to leave you with one last powerful question to think about. Looking back on everything we just talked about, which one of these glitches have you been apologizing for your entire life? Maybe it's time to stop.